Hello again, this is Lauren, contributor to Great Black Speakers, and today I'm speaking with Cha Jones, author, speaker, and founder of Expat Women of Color. Welcome, Cha.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Definitely is our pleasure to speak with you today. So please tell the audience who you are and what you do.
Okay. Well, I am the founder of an organization called Expat Women of Color, and we are a networking association for women who live, work, study, and travel abroad. And so we have a connection with women, I would say probably about 4,500 women all over the world who really are currently either living abroad or they have a desire to live abroad. And then we also have a connection with colleges and universities to increase the number of minority students who are studying abroad. I am also a speaker as well as an author. I have 3 books. One is called Every Girl Needs Her Pearls. And then I have a book called The New Urban International Migration. And then I recently just wrote a book called You Too Can Live Abroad, which is just basically a guidebook for those who are wanting to live abroad, but maybe not, they don't have the support of a corporation.
Wow. You've definitely done some great work in this area of living abroad from what I've read up on you. So tell us, where have you lived? Where have your travels been?
Well, I've only lived in one country, and that is South Korea, which I absolutely love. And I lived there for almost 4 years.
Wow.
I have traveled to countries like China, Japan, Malaysia. I've been to Panama, Dominican Republic. I've been to Bahamas. I've been to I've been to about 14 different countries, and then, so they kind of like start meshing together.
Yeah. That's awesome. So what would you consider to be one of your favorite places?
I would say my all-time favorite to this point has been Malaysia. I loved Malaysia because of the weather. I loved the fact that there was so much to do, and there were so many different cultures represented. It was just like a hodgepodge of cultures. Your Indian culture, you have your Chinese culture that are heavily populated there, and then people are just walking around. That you see a lot of Muslims, but then they're in all different races and shades, and it smells wonderful. Like you have different foods, so I loved it.
That's awesome. Malaysia, we'll have to put that on our list and get one of your books and get some tips. So tell me, what are some resources that are required for a woman of color traveling abroad?
I think that it's very important to make a connection, whether it's through social media or maybe in the city that you are currently living in that may have resources for intercultural relations. Maybe there's a Chinese club if you're about to go to China. Or if you're going to India, maybe there's an Indian club or meetup that you can join and start to really immerse yourself in the culture and learning about that particular place. I think that's great for a person who is getting ready to either live or travel abroad. I would say that you really want to go find you some books that may be about the culture. There's a great series called Culture Shock, because it's real, and I think a lot of times people don't think about it, and they book this trip to go to Indonesia, and then they learn when they get there, things that they're doing that's inappropriate. And so that series actually helps people learn about things that you shouldn't do, things that you should be aware of. I know when I did go to Malaysia that I started reading about Malaysia, and I learned that, there are some places that you probably don't want to go. When you get off the airplane and you're at the airport, there's going to be all these people that are asking you to take a cab or buy this or buy that, and you want to make sure that you're safe, because they do have a lot of people who are out, and snatching materials like your cameras or suitcases and things like that. So you, not to be scared or create fear, but just to kind of have an awareness of where you are and what you're doing. And I think a lot of times, and I've seen this in my own personal travels, that I've been with someone and they're just really carefree, and sometimes that's not the best thing, but I think you should, enjoy the culture that you're going to visit or you're going to live in, but at the same time be aware of your environment.
Yeah, that's great advice, because like you mentioned, you go to different countries and there are different cultural norms. The way that we shake hands here in America is not necessarily the way they shake hands in India. So those are things that, we should know. Now, tell me, what is in your suitcase when you're traveling? I mean, as Black women, we're concerned about our hair. What about the humidity in Malaysia? How does that work?
That's always interesting. I remember when I got ready to move to Korea, I knew I was going for a year. I knew that there was going to be 4 seasons, and that was extremely difficult. That was probably my biggest challenge to date in life, because what's a girl to do without her shoes? I have shoes. I need my shoes with me. And then I knew I was going to be working, and I needed work, attire. Then I needed let's go out attire. I needed all this, and I definitely needed all my hair products. And one of the things, and I had really planned for this whole hair experiment, and I had my flat iron and I had transformers. But when I got to Korea, my transformer blew, and my beautiful flat iron was ruined. And I was like, okay, this is gonna be interesting. And I bought a Korean flat iron, but it didn't make my hair as silky as I wanted it to be at the time, and it's just a disaster. So I think for me, definitely just having an understanding of what the culture is going to be like, having an understanding of what the weather is going to be like. When I arrived in Korea, it was a rainy season, and it was downpouring. I wasn't ready for that. And I don't know how I could have gotten ready for that, but I needed a huge umbrella, and some walking shoes. That was important because I was going to walk versus having a car at first. I think sometimes we bring way too much stuff. So just really having a list of what is appropriate, then know what you can get in the stores. I had been told that they didn't have fluoride in toothpaste, and that they didn't have any black hair products, which was very untrue. So I brought a lot of things that I didn't need, but I wanted to be safe. And definitely for hair, I made sure I had the essentials. I had my moisturizers, I had the right shampoos, because some of that I couldn't get. And fortunately for me, in South Korea, there was the base. So you had army bases where I could get some of that. But if you're in a country where you're not going to, have America readily available to you, then definitely make sure you have the right clothes, the right shoes, and hair products.
Good advice. Good advice. So how does one get involved in a travel program? A first-time person who's never traveled abroad, how do they begin? And what would you say is the least amount of money required to kind of jumpstart your travels?
That's difficult because it depends on how you travel. So I can't give you you need to have X amount of money saved, because it depends on if you're going to live somewhere, if you're going to just travel somewhere, and it depends on where you're going. Is the money, the exchange rate greater or less than where you're coming from? So it just that's a very hard question. So I think you just have to really do some research, and then you have to know yourself. For instance, I don't particularly like staying in hostels. Nothing wrong with them, just not my mode of transportation, or my mode of traveling is not being able to stay or staying in a hostel. So I think it just depends on, are you a high-end traveler or low-end traveler? There are some people who can backpack, not my thing.
Yeah.
I like W's, I like Hiltons, but then there are places where you go in a nice boutique hotel is very reasonable. So I think you definitely have to do your research, and you have to know what your needs, wants, and desires are, and be realistic. So if you're getting ready to start traveling, definitely look at different organizations that meet your needs. If you are a student, there are lots of different programs out there where it may cost you a little bit more, but you're actually with a program that's taking you somewhere, and you have the program that kind of gives you some stability. Mm-hmm. If you are a solo traveler, just make sure that you've done all the research on that company or country, that you have really looked at your wants and needs, and then you put a budget together. There are some people who don't put budgets together. I don't necessarily put a budget when I'm traveling, but I know what it is that I want to do, and I've researched places to go, things to do, what I want to eat, what I want to experience, and then I've kind of put together what that's going to cost me. I think that's extremely important. So just making sure, if you're going with someone, it could be a couple $1,000s. It could be a little bit more expensive, and it just depends on what you're going to do when you get there.
Okay. Yeah, there's some, travel experts that write these books, and it's like, hey, you can go to 20 countries for $5 a day, and it's like, no, this can't be true, and then it really usually isn't. But I just find it interesting that people will sell that it's very cheap to go, but sometimes it depends, like you mentioned, on what type of traveler you are, how high your expectations or your standards are in regard to your traveling. So in 2009, you won an award for the first place storytelling in International Toastmasters. What kind of story was this that you told?
The story was about my mother. My mother has bipolar disorder, and I just talked about my experience growing up with a mother who has this disorder, and just the things that I had to go through.
Okay. Well, great job on winning the award, and I'm sure it was a very awesome story. Is that something that you speak to in your speaking engagements?
I do. I'm very passionate about mental health, especially for minorities, and definitely for African Americans, because that's something that we tend not to talk about. Yeah. It's the elephant in the room. If you have that family member who has a problem, they tend to always say, oh, that person's having a nervous breakdown, or they're just a little sick right now, and you kind of just don't talk about it. I grew up where a lot of my cousins didn't even know that my mother had this disease, and I got older and was having conversations, and they were like, you didn't go through that. And I'm like, are you crazy? Like, yes, I did do that. And those were experiences that I had to deal with. So I just think it's really important for especially African Americans to really address that. It doesn't mean that you're crazy if you have bipolar disorder. It just means that you have an illness, and it's just like having cancer. Cancer is a disease that, a lot of people can talk about because you have ailments that come along with this. You may have some pain. Well, obviously, a person with a mental disorder, you may never see the reflection of the actual disease, but it's still real, and it is a disease, and it's something that we still need to talk about and address, and really put it out there and just say, okay, this person has this issue, and what can we do to get them the medication, or what can we do to make sure that they're safe? And I think that's extremely important. And I think a lot of things would actually change if we start to talk about it and address the issues that are at hand.
Yeah, you're right about that. That is an issue that kind of goes under the radar in the minority communities, considering invisible disabilities. People, they often want to be attracted to causes that they can see this person is hurting physically. But there are a lot of mental issues that our people suffer from. So kudos to you on even, speaking to that topic. So tell me about the other things you speak about and give us your contact information so we can reach out to you and learn more about you.
Definitely. I talk about a lot of women's issues because I'm definitely a woman and I advocate for women. And I think a lot of times we need to talk about the fears and why we have the fears. I'm really passionate about the disparity between wages, so definitely can talk about that. I obviously talk about travel, mental health, and then I'm really, really passionate about getting more minorities to study abroad. That's really a big push of mine because I realize only 5.4% of African Americans study abroad compared to like 87% of Caucasians, and I think there's a huge gap and we definitely can feel that. And I talk about some other things, but one of my things I rallied around a few years ago was breast cancer and helping more minorities, especially young women, because African Americans tend to get breast cancer at a much higher rate at a much younger age. And did a lot of research and created a documentary around that several years ago. And so that's one of my passions as well. But my contact information, you can always reach me on my website at www.chajones.com. My Twitter handle is my name, @ChaJones. Facebook is author Cha Jones. And I have Instagram. I just don't really go on it, but it's Cha Jones. So everything is Cha Jones. And so I am readily available to answer questions. And then I have the nonprofit organization's website is www.expatwomenofcolor.com.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you definitely have provided us with great information to reach out to you. I think that, you should have a great response because that is an alarming statistic that you mentioned, and we need to do something about that. So thank you for leading the charge.
I'm happy to do it. It's something near and dear to my heart, and I just think that we can make a change. And I think that it's really important for everyone to see the world, because when you step out of your comfort zone, there's so many possibilities, but more importantly, you get to know yourself when you go into another environment. You get to reflect on the things that are important to you, but you also get to see the disconnect that you can't see when you're actually in your own environment.
Excellent, excellent. Well, it has been a pleasure, Cha Jones, and we are delighted to have you a part of Great Black Speakers and hope to get your information out to a larger audience so that we can decrease that gap in that statistic. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, Lauren, and I'm glad to have done this interview, but more importantly, I'm glad to be part of Great Black Speakers.
Thank you.